it's almost certain there have already been calls from the Eastern Cape government for the national government to declare parts of the Eastern Cape hit by flooding, heavy rain as a disaster area. Last night, the death toll, 49 people confirmed dead, including 6 school children. A taxi driver also with a taxi assistant. There have been floods that have hit in and around the Umtata area, the districts of OR Tambo, Amatole. And the Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane describing it as the first disaster of its kind in the province. But around the world and in South Africa, more frequent and more intense weather shocks due to climate change. There could be droughts, could be wildfires, but in this case, it is floods. Remember the 2022 floods in KZN? It saw the shrinking of the South African economy of 0.7%. Major hits to manufacturing, logistics, and of course there's the human cost. Joining me on the line now is Dr Nomhle Ngwenya, who's an independent climate change researcher. Good morning, Nomhle. Really appreciate your time. Is it simply our reality now that we use KZN as an example, now Eastern Cape, that intense, unpredictable weather shocks is simply our reality?
Good morning, Leston, to your viewers. Thank you for having me. I think, the impacts of climate change are far-reaching, and what we're starting to see is much more intense and frequent weather anomalies. We are now in the season of winter, and the brutal cold conditions are perfectly normal. However, what is not normal is the intense flooding conditions that we've seen. You touched on the lives lost by flooding. If we were to just even take climate data from about 10-20 years ago, we did not have such impacts and lives being lost by flood events during winter season. I think importantly, you also touched on the fact that South Africa is not an anomaly. This is something that is being seen globally. Currently Europe is in its summer season, and already some of the highest, hottest conditions have already been reached. And that's just only in, mild summer. So they haven't even reached their peak summer. So definitely climate change is creating a very volatile, intense climate conditions.
What are the mitigation measures? Of course, we can talk about the broader international and our national government policy. But if we look at the example at the moment of the Eastern Cape, in the areas around Oratambo and Matole, in terms of climate change protection mechanisms, what are we talking about here? Do we also have to bring in the conversation around adequate planning, adequate housing, urban planning, emergency response, preparedness for the immediate future?
Rightfully said. So there's two sort of solutions that we can look at. One is sort of the immediate and one is the long term. The immediate is really we need to start, allocating, a budget to disaster relief grants. I think we would have also noted during the April 2022 floods, a similar approach was also conducted. However, one of the challenges around, disaster relief is around the transparency and the accountability. For example, Auditor General has come out to say that some of the disaster relief grants that were meant to be allocated were not, adequately used. So that really needs to be ring-fenced, and there needs to be a lot of transparency and accountability, especially from municipalities. The second part relates to policies. If you look at our disaster risk management framework at present, it does not account for extreme weather events, but also does not account for what happens when you have people who live in low-lying areas. A big part of why we had a high, loss of life in the Eastern Cape is you had a lot of houses which were near a flood lane. And it's very important that, we come up, in our disaster framework as to how do we ensure that adequate housing is also factored in, when a disaster does strike.
Dr. Nomhle Ngwenya, I have to leave it there, but I really appreciate your time, independent climate change researcher.